The grocery store on Maple Ridge Road was the kind of place that didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. No fancy displays near the entrance, no seasonal decorations that cost more than most people's grocery bills. Just fluorescents that buzzed faintly overhead, rows of canned goods priced to move, and a checkout line that always seemed one cart too long. On a Tuesday evening in late November, when the parking lot was half empty, and the sky outside had gone the color of old pewter, a woman named Carrie Sutton stood in aisle 7, with a calculator app open on her cracked phone screen, and a look on her face that she had gotten very good at hiding. She was 38 years old. She had brown hair she kept pulled back, because there was no time for anything else, and eyes that were quick to read a room before committing to any expression. She wore a fleece jacket that had seen better days, and work boots still dusted with dry mud from a landscaping job that had ended 2 weeks ago, when the company downsized and let her go with a handshake and a promise to keep her in mind. She had heard that before. In the cart in front of her sat a box of store-brand pasta, 2 cans of diced tomatoes, a small carton of milk, a loaf of bread that was on markdown because the sell-by date was tomorrow, and a bunch of bananas she had chosen because they were the cheapest fruit in the produce section. She had been calculating and recalculating for the past 10 minutes, moving slowly through the aisle the way you do when you know the number at the bottom has to come out right and you're not sure yet if it will. Her daughter was at home. Her name was Ava, and she was 7 years old, and she had eaten cereal for dinner twice this week already, and hadn't complained once. That was the part that got to Carrie the most. Not the cereal itself, but the not complaining. 7-year-olds noticed things. They noticed more than anyone gave them credit for. And Ava had started to learn, somewhere in the past few months, that there were things you just didn't say out loud in their house. Carrie's husband had left 14 months ago. The word left was doing a lot of work in that sentence. What actually happened was more complicated and less dignified, and had involved a conversation on a Sunday morning that Carrie had replayed so many times it had worn smooth, like a stone carried too long, in a pocket. What remained was Ava, and a 2-bedroom apartment on the 2nd floor, of a building that smelled like carpet cleaner, and a set of bills that arrived with the same faithful regularity as the seasons. She had found some work since then, landscaping through the spring and summer. Some house cleaning on weekends, a few weeks at a distribution center before her back gave out from the lifting. None of it had been steady. None of it had been enough to stop the slow slide. She was behind on 2 months of rent, and she had approximately $41 and some change in her bank account, and it was 9 days until the 1st of December. She looked at the calculator. Pasta, tomatoes, milk, bread, bananas. $34 and change if she was right. That would leave her with enough for gas to get Ava to school and back until Thursday. After that, she would figure out Thursday on Thursday. She put the cart in motion and started toward the front of the store. The checkout lanes were quiet. One cashier was on duty at lane 3. A teenager named by his name tag as Brett, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else, and was doing a decent job of not showing it. Carrie began unloading her cart onto the belt, setting each item down carefully, the way you handle things when they matter more than they look. That was when she noticed the man in line ahead of her. He was in his mid-40s, Carrie guessed, though he looked tired in the way that added years to a face. He wore a gray work shirt with a logo she couldn't make out, and jeans with a tear at the knee that was clearly from actual work, and not from a store. He had a young boy with him, maybe 5 or 6, who was standing very close to his father's leg the way small children do when they're not sure about a place. The boy had a short haircut and a striped shirt, and he was holding a small plastic dinosaur in one hand, turning it over and over, the way kids do when they're trying to stay patient. The man's name, Carrie would learn later, was Grant. Grant Holloway. He was 41 years old and he worked in heating and cooling repair, and he had been doing it since he was 22, which meant he knew more about how to fix things than almost anyone. And also, that his knees were starting to object to the years of kneeling in crawl spaces. His son's name was Owen. Wait, Owen was on the list. His son's name was Felix. Felix Holloway, age 6, who had been told by his father that morning that they were going to the grocery store after school, and who had asked very seriously if they could get the good kind of apple juice this time. Grant had said he would see. The good kind of apple juice was not in the cart. Carrie could see that from where she stood. What was in the cart was the kind of careful, deliberate shopping she recognized immediately because she did it herself. Store brands, quantities that made sense for 2 people, nothing extra, nothing indulgent. A bag of rice, a package of chicken thighs, some frozen vegetables, a box of the kind of crackers that came in the big yellow bag and lasted a long time. Felix was looking at his dinosaur. Grant was watching Brett scan his items, with the particular focused attention of a man doing mental arithmetic in real time. The total came up. Brett read it aloud. Grant went very still for a moment, in the way that people go still when a number is bigger than they were hoping. He reached into his back pocket and took out his wallet and opened it. And Carrie, from where she was standing, could see what he saw when he looked inside. She had seen that same view from her own wallet enough times to know exactly what it meant. Grant pulled out some cash and counted it. He counted it again. Then he looked up at Brett with an expression that was so carefully controlled it almost worked. And he said, quietly, "Can you take off the chicken?" Brett, to his credit, didn't react the way some people would have. He just nodded and voided the item and read the new total. Grant counted the cash again. He came up short again. "The rice too," he said. His voice was even. He had clearly had to do this before. Brett voided the rice. The new total came up. Grant paid. He took the 2 bags, the frozen vegetables, the crackers, a few other things Carrie hadn't been able to see clearly, and he said thank you to Brett in that quiet formal way of someone who is holding themselves together with considerable effort. And then he reached down and took Felix's hand. Felix looked up at his father. He had stopped turning the dinosaur. "Dad," he said. His voice was low, the way children's voices get when they understand something they don't have the words for yet. "What about the apples?" Grant crouched down to his son's level right there in the checkout lane. He put a hand on Felix's shoulder, and he said something Carrie couldn't hear, and Felix looked at him for a moment with those completely open eyes that children have before they learn to guard them. And then he nodded slowly and looked back at his dinosaur. They walked away from the register. Carrie stood at the belt. She was aware of Brett looking at her. She was aware of her own cart, her own items, her own $41. She was aware of Ava at home, eating cereal probably, watching something on the tablet with the cracked screen that they kept meaning to replace. She was also aware that she had just watched a man take the food out of his own cart so he could afford what was left, while his son asked about apples, and then she watched that man walk his son toward the exit, with his head up and his hand held out for Felix to take. She left her cart at the belt. She didn't think about it in any deliberate way. She didn't weigh it out or reason through it. She simply turned and walked quickly toward the exit, the automatic doors sliding open ahead of her, and the cold November air hit her face. And she looked out into the parking lot and found them. Grant, adjusting the bags in his hands, Felix walking next to him with the dinosaur hanging from his fingers. "Hey," Carrie said. Grant turned. He had the look of someone who was used to being approached by strangers in parking lots for the wrong reasons, and was waiting to find out which kind of stranger this was. "I'm sorry," Carrie said. "I saw in there." She paused. This was harder to say out loud than she had thought it would be. "I saw what happened at the register." Grant's expression closed slightly, not unkind but careful. "We're fine," he said. "I know," she said. "I know you are." She stopped. Started again. I'm not doing this to make you feel bad. I just." She looked at Felix, who was looking at her with the open assessing gaze of a 6-year-old. "I'm a single mom. My daughter's 7. I know what it looks like when you're doing the math." Something shifted in Grant's face. "Not much, just enough." "What kind of apples does he like?" Carrie asked. Grant looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Felix. Felix, who had clearly been following this conversation with great attention, looked up at his father. "Honeycrisp," Felix said. Grant made a sound that was almost a laugh. "Yeah," he said. "The good ones." Carrie nodded. "Wait here," she said. "Please." She went back inside. She did not know, standing in the produce section in front of the apple display, what exactly she was doing. She knew what was in her bank account. She knew what her rent looked like. She knew that Ava was going to need new shoes before the winter was out, and that Carrie had been putting that conversation off for 2 weeks. She stood in front of the Honeycrisp apples, and she thought about all of that. And then she thought about Felix, and the way he had asked about the apples, and the way Grant had crouched down to answer him at eye level, in a checkout lane in a grocery store. And she picked up a bag. She went back to the chicken section. She picked up a package of the same chicken thighs she had seen in Grant's cart. She went back to the rice aisle. Then she stood in front of a small display of children's vitamins near the pharmacy section. The kind that came in animal shapes, and cost $12, and were always the first thing to go when money was tight. And she stood there for longer than she meant to. She put them in the basket. She had $22 left after what was in her cart, and she was going to be fine. She was going to be absolutely fine. She didn't know how yet, but she had been not knowing how for 14 months, and she was still here, and Ava was still here, and Tuesday evening in late November had not beaten them yet. She went back to the self-checkout near the entrance, paid for Grant's items separately, and asked the attendant, a woman in her 50s named by her name tag as Roz, if she had a bag she could put them in. Roz looked at what Carrie was buying. She looked at Carrie's face. She went and got a bag without asking any questions, and when she came back, she also put a small package of chocolate chip cookies in the bag from somewhere behind the counter and said, "Bags on me," and turned back to her station before Carrie could respond. Outside, Grant was still there. He was standing near a pickup truck that was old, but clearly maintained, with Felix sitting on the tailgate swinging his legs, the dinosaur propped up next to him. When Carrie came out through the doors, he saw the bag in her hands, and his jaw tightened in the way that happened when people were trying to manage something they hadn't asked to feel. "You didn't have to do that," he said. "I know," she said. She held the bag out. "The chicken's in there, and the rice, and some vitamins. The gummy ones, my daughter likes the dinosaur-shaped ones, but they only had the bear-shaped ones. I don't know if that matters." Felix looked up sharply at the word dinosaur. Grant took the bag. He looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at her with the particular expression of a person who has been holding something heavy for a long time and has just had someone reach over and take part of the weight without being asked. "I don't know what to say," he said. "You don't have to say anything," Carrie said. Felix slid off the tailgate. He walked over to Carrie with the solemnity of a small person engaged in something important. He held the dinosaur out toward her. "You can hold him," he said. "He's a brachiosaurus. He's the nice kind." Carrie looked at the dinosaur. She looked at Felix. She took the dinosaur in both hands and looked at it carefully, the way you look at something when a child has trusted you with it. "He's very good," she said. Felix nodded seriously. "His name is Hank." "Hank," Carrie repeated. "That's a good name." She handed Hank back. Felix accepted him with both hands and returned to the tailgate. Grant was watching her. He had a look on his face she recognized. Not pity, not gratitude exactly, but something more complicated than either of those, the look of a person recalibrating something inside themselves. "My name's Grant," he said. "Carrie, you said you have a daughter, Ava. She's 7. Grant nodded. He shifted the grocery bags. Then he reached into the truck and came back with something, a business card, slightly bent at one corner, the kind that lived in a wallet for a long time. "I do HVAC," he said. "Heating and cooling. If anything goes out this winter? Furnace? Anything, call me first. I'll come out, no charge for the diagnostic, whatever I can do." Carrie took the card. She looked at it. Grant Holloway, Holloway Heating and Cooling. A phone number with a local area code. "That's not nothing," she said. "Our furnace is—" "They always are," Grant said. "Call me before it becomes an emergency. It's always cheaper that way." She put the card in her jacket pocket. They stood in the parking lot for another moment, two people who had met each other at the exact place where pride runs out and something more honest takes over. The sky had gone darker while they were inside, and the temperature had dropped another degree or two, and across the parking lot someone was loading bags into a minivan with practiced efficiency, not noticing them, not needing to. "Thank you," Grant said. He meant it in the way that people mean it when the word is the only one that will do. "Get those apples home," Carrie said. Felix, from the tailgate, raised Hank the brachiosaurus in a gesture that might have been a wave. Carrie drove home with $22 in her account, and a warmth in her chest that she hadn't planned on and couldn't entirely explain. She thought about what she had done and waited for the regret to come, the way it usually came when she spent money she didn't have. It didn't come. What came instead was something quieter and more stubborn, something that felt like it might actually hold. Ava was at the kitchen table when Carrie got home, working through a worksheet with a broken crayon, still in her school clothes. She looked up when Carrie came in with the grocery bags. "What did you get?" she asked. "Pasta," Carrie said, "and tomatoes, and bread." She set the bags on the counter, and bananas. Ava came to look. She examined the contents of the bags with the focused attention of someone who took groceries seriously, which at 7 years old she had started to do. "Good bananas," she said, approving. "I thought so." They made pasta that night, the simple kind with canned tomatoes and a little garlic salt, and they ate at the kitchen table with the overhead light on, because the lamp in the corner had a burned-out bulb Carrie hadn't replaced yet. Ava told her about something that had happened at recess, involving a jump rope and a disagreement about rules that had resolved itself, apparently, through the intervention of a teacher named Mrs. Okafor, who had a very good voice for cutting through noise. Carrie listened and asked questions, and laughed once, genuinely, and it felt good in the way that things feel good when you are not performing them. After Ava was in bed, Carrie sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea she'd made from a bag that was on its second use, and she took the business card out of her jacket pocket and set it on the table in front of her. Grant Holloway. Holloway Heating and Cooling. She thought about him driving home with Felix and the apples and the chicken and the rice. She thought about Felix and Hank the Brachiosaurus. She thought about Roz at the register, and the cookies she had slipped into the bag without a word. She thought about how many of these moments were probably happening right now, in parking lots and checkout lanes, and all the ordinary unglamorous places where people brushed up against each other's actual lives, and how most of them probably went unnoticed, unrecorded, unremarked upon. How they happened anyway. How they had always happened, would always happen, in the gaps between the things that made the news. She put the card in the small drawer in the kitchen, where she kept things that mattered. Ava's emergency contact form, a birthday card from her mother, a photograph from a better year that she hadn't been able to throw away. She put the card in there, next to all of it, and she closed the drawer. The furnace clicked on somewhere behind the wall, doing its job for another night. Carrie sat with her tea until it was gone. 3 days later, she got a call from a landscaping company she had applied to back in September. A company that did winter work. Salting, snow removal, that kind of thing. The woman on the phone said they had a position if she was still interested. It wasn't a lot of hours to start, she said. But it was something. Carrie said yes before the woman finished the sentence. She called her neighbor to ask about watching Ava on the early mornings. Then she sat down on the edge of the couch and let herself feel it. Not triumphant, not fixed, because nothing was fixed exactly, but steadier than she had been. The way the ground feels after you've been walking on something uncertain for a long time, and you step onto something that holds. Ava came in from the other room. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Sitting," Carrie said. Ava considered this. Then she climbed up onto the couch next to her mother, tucked herself in close the way she used to do when she was smaller, and looked at the wall with the same focused seriousness she brought to most things. "Okay," she said. And that was enough. 4 weeks later, on a Thursday evening when the temperature had dropped, and Carrie heard something that didn't sound right coming from behind the baseboard near the hallway, she went to the kitchen drawer and took out the card and dialed the number. Grant picked up on the second ring. "It's Carrie," she said. "From the grocery store parking lot. You said to call before it became an emergency." There was a brief pause. Then she heard somewhere in the background of his phone, a small voice asking who it was. "A friend," Grant said, and then to her. "Tell me what you're hearing," she told him. He listened. He said he could come by Saturday morning if that worked, and that he'd bring his tools and take a look before the temperature dropped any further. "Saturday works," Carrie said. "Bring Ava," he said. "Felix has been asking about that woman who knew how to hold Hank properly." Carrie laughed. A real one, the kind that surprised her. "I'll let her know," she said. "She's going to want to know his whole story." "He has one," Grant said. "It's long. Felix will tell the whole thing if you give him an opening, so I'm warning you now." "Noted," she said. After they hung up, Carrie stood in the hallway for a moment, and listened to the baseboard and the furnace, and the buildings settling around her. All the ordinary sounds of a Tuesday night in winter. All the sounds of a life still in progress. She went back to the kitchen. Ava was at the table again, working through a book she'd brought home from the school library, one foot tucked under her on the chair the way she always sat, deeply absorbed, wholly herself. Carrie stood in the doorway and watched her for a moment. There was still rent to figure out, still shoes to buy, still a long winter ahead in an apartment with an aging furnace and a lamp with a burned-out bulb. None of it had been solved by a bag of groceries or a business card or a woman at the register who gave away cookies without making a thing of it. Life didn't work that way, and Carrie had known that long enough not to expect it to. But something had changed even so. Not the circumstances, not the numbers. Something quieter than that and more durable. The knowledge that on a Tuesday evening in November in a grocery store on Maple Ridge Road, a few ordinary people had looked at each other. Really looked. And decided to do the small thing they could do. No announcement. No audience. No reason except that it was the right moment and they were there in it and they chose. That was all it had been. That was everything it had been. Ava looked up from her book. "Mom," she said, "did you know brachiosauruses had really long necks so they could eat the tops of trees?" Carrie came into the kitchen and sat down across from her daughter. "I think I heard something about that," she said. "Tell me more."